Thank you. Thanks, Roy, for a great introduction. It's great to be here. And let's see. Are we in the right place here? Okay. Yeah, so by the way, I guess lunch is going to be served right after this. So that means right now I'm the only thing between you and your food. So I'll try to make this pretty brisk. I've structured this in questions, like my book. And the first question is one that I get asked a lot about this book. The first one to ask it was my wife when I told her I was writing the book. And the question is, why would anyone write a book about questioning? Well, it goes back to I'm a longtime journalist, so questioning has always been part of my work. You know, I always sort of a tool of the trade. But when over the years, I started to realize it's really important beyond just the way that journalists use it. I was interviewing a lot of leaders in the ad world and discovered that people like Lee Clow, Jeff Goodby, Dan Wyden, and a lot of the other great sort of ad leaders in the business are really great questioners. If you think about it, they're really curious guys, curious people who are always questioning, you know, what does this brand really mean to people? What is really going to resonate with people? What is an ad? What should an ad consist of? There are people who are basically reinventing their business every day. So it struck me that they were great questioners. And then I started to write more and more about the tech world and realized, you know, those guys are really questioners. I mean, the people leading the tech industry today are basically, you know, in Silicon Valley now, it's been said that questions are the new answers. Because when you're in that field, you basically are questioning every day. You're basically trying to figure out, you know, what is coming down the pike and what do we have to do differently tomorrow than what we're doing right now. And it's actually a lesson that applies to business in general. It's actually not that new. I mean, I discovered that Peter Drucker, who's one of he's kind of the father of consulting, and he's a guy who's been a sort of a legendary figure in business for a long time. He's been on this question kick, you know, for long before I was. I mean, Drucker basically said, he used to say his clients would say to him, you know, give us the answers. He'd come into Coca-Cola and big brands like that, and they'd say, you know, can you give us some answers to these problems we have? And Drucker's thing was, that's not my role. My role is to ask you the right questions and help you ask the right questions so you can figure it out for yourself. I mean, you really don't want a consultant coming in and telling you what to do. You want to figure it out for yourself. So I thought that was really interesting and really ahead of the curve. And Drucker's always been ahead of the curve because if I noticed that, you know, he was reading a more beautiful question years before I'd even written it. And so Drucker's good. You know, it's good to have Drucker and Jobs and Bezos saying the things that you're saying in your book. But when I wanted to really pull out the heavy hitter to back me up, I went with Einstein. And Einstein's been talking, or was talking about questioning forever. I mean, he basically said at one point that if he had a problem to solve, and he had an hour to solve it, and his life depended on it, he would spend the first 55 minutes making sure he was answering the right question and solving the right problem. Because Einstein knew if you're answering the wrong question, you're going down the wrong path. So, okay, so, you know, this convinced me that this was a great topic for business today and just for people in general. But you may be wondering, what does this have to do with public relations in 2014? And for the answer to that, I would refer you just to the website for this conference, which I checked out right away and noticed that it has all these great questions. And you know, these are really, they're really interesting questions about sort of the change that's going on in the business right now. But to me, they're really all variations of pretty much the same question, which is this. And I think, you know, this is a question that not only the public relations industry is asking, basically every industry is asking some version of this question right now, because everyone's been hit sort of blindsided by so much change. And you know, every day the business you thought you were in becomes like a different business. And that's happening across industries. So where questioning comes into this is the idea that And this is a kind of a radical notion that I'm putting forth in my book, that as the world gets more complicated, the value of answers goes down, the value of questions goes up. So what happens is, we have kind of these ways of doing things in our business. We have a certain expertise that we've gathered over the years, and those are the answers, right? Those are the answers we kind of use to do our job. But in today's world, answers have a very short shelf life. Like, things change almost immediately. So when you get the answer to how to do something, it's pretty quickly obsolete. So that explains the falling value of the answers. The reason questions are so important is because if things become obsolete, they're always changing, you need good questioning skills to figure out the next answer, the next thing you should be doing. So when I was researching what a question is and what a question does, which is kind of a funny thing to be researching, it's so basic, right? But you don't really think about it. So the definition that I got from the Right Question Institute is this one. The questioning is basically the tool that helps us figure out what to do when we don't know what to do. And the questioning is the tool that lets you come at a problem and the unknown from all different directions. So I also use in the book, I use the analogy of the flashlight, right? Questioning is like, questions are like the flashlight that we use to sort of explore the unknown, to sort of figure out what we should do, how to attack the darkness. And good questioners have a bigger flashlight. Hope that's not too suggestive, that image. But, it's true. And it's not only a matter of asking more questions, that we should be asking more questions, but it's the way you ask questions, which is something I talk about a lot in the book, that you have to sort of get better at how you phrase and frame the questions as you're looking at your industry or your business and trying to figure out what to do next. This question that I mentioned earlier is really not a great question. It's kind of like a panicked, screeching, desperate question. And really, we should be asking questions like this. It's really the same question, kind of reframed in a way that's a little more positive, a little more empowering, So that's a big part of the book, is just figuring out first of all, how do we step back and question more? And secondly, when we do ask questions about our industry or our job or our life, how do we kind of frame those questions and how do we word them? So one of the other questions I look at in the book is, are questions more powerful than statements? This is pretty interesting, especially for people in your field. I think it's interesting to think about the fact that if you look at, questions are really engaging. If you look at, let's say, magazines, right? And when magazines are on the newsstand and they're trying to engage everyone, they're trying to sell the magazine, right? And if you ever notice how many questions are used in the headlines on magazines, what it basically tells you is that magazines have figured out that questions are the way you sort of attract people. They're the way you stimulate people's curiosity. You sort of create a story that has to be answered. You create a puzzle, and it even works in advertising. Some of the most effective commercials have been questions. Some of the most effective political campaigns. This was Ronald Reagan when he knocked off Jimmy Carter back in 1980, and it's interesting because he could have done that as a statement, right? The campaign could have done that as a statement. They could have said, "Oh, you guys are really worse off now than you were 4 years ago." But by framing it as a question, it was really brilliant because it made the voters think about this themselves and come to their own decision about, am I better off or not? And then they kind of knew that they would come to the decision that we're not. So it really worked very effectively. So it's gotten so that, I've gotten so sold on the engagement power of questions that I'm actually now making the case, and I've been arguing this in various forums and publications, that companies ought to get rid of their mission statements and replace them with mission questions. Because the question is so much more engaging than a statement. And if you put a mission statement out there to your employees or your constituencies, and you say basically, oh, we are a company that makes the world a better place through robotics. It doesn't have that much impact. People think of it as hype. It kind of falls on deaf ears, But if you were to just think about reframing that as a company asking, how might we make the world a better place through robotics? I mean, the tone is totally different. You know, it's not arrogant anymore. It's kind of exploring. It's kind of curious, and it's inviting other people to engage with that message. So other people could say, yeah, that's an interesting mission they're on, including the employees might say that. I even say that we should replace our New Year's resolutions with questolutions, because there's actually scientific research now that shows if you want to do something, like if you want to change your behavior or do something in your life, you're more likely to do it if you ask yourself it as a question as opposed to a statement. So like if I say, if I want to drink more water, if I say as a resolution, I'm going to drink more water, damn it, I'm going to start drinking more water, I'm probably not going to do it. But if I ask myself, how might I drink more water? Your brain automatically starts going to work on that. Like even when you're sleeping, your brain is working on that. So it's a really effective way to actually do just about anything. Which raises the question that if questioning is so great, why do we stop doing it? And we really do. We tend to cut back on our questioning pretty dramatically at a certain age. There's research that, this is my niece, by the way. There's research that shows that kids ask 40,000 questions between ages 2 and 5. Don't ask me how they counted that. Someone at Harvard actually tallied that figure. It's particularly pronounced among 4-year-old girls. 4-year-old girls are questioning machines. And by one study in the UK, a 4-year-old girl asks 390 questions a day of her mum. And the reason she doesn't ask her dad is because he says, go ask your mum. So it's an interesting phenomenon. Roy mentioned Louis C.K. I'm a big Louis C.K. fan. And Louis C.K. has talked a lot about questioning, the questioning phenomenon, and how, you know, young kids are asking so many questions that it tends to drive the adults crazy. And he has the routine he does that is, you know, again, 4-year-old girl. The 4-year-old daughter is asking him, you know, why can't we go outside to play, Papa? And he says, well, because it's raining. Why? Well, water's coming out of the sky. Why? Because it was in a cloud. Why? Well, clouds form when there's vapor. Why? I don't know. I don't know any more things. Those are all the things I know. Why? Because I'm stupid, okay? I'm stupid. Why? Because I didn't pay attention in school. Why? Because I was high all the time. I smoked too much pot. And then it just devolves from that point until he's finally saying to his 4-year-old daughter, because we're alone in the universe and no one gives a shit about us. But anyway, you know, like the point Louis C.K. is making there is interesting, like questioning even parents who are like the most receptive audience in the world get a little bit worn out by their kids' questions and the fact that it reveals how much they don't know and all of that. But the problem really starts when kids go to school, and the research that I've come across indicates that basically questioning drops off a cliff right around age 6, which is right around the time kids are starting to be in classrooms all day. And so it's interesting. I mean, this is an interesting issue. I don't want to oversimplify it. It's pretty complicated. But one of the issues certainly is that in school, you're trained to give the answers. And your questions are really not particularly desired because they kind of slow down the lesson and sometimes they wander off topic and things like that. So we're sort of getting a strong message in school that it's about the answers. As a student, you're supposed to give the answers, not be asking a lot of questions. And this is an interesting thing. I've been working with a group called the Right Question Institute, a nonprofit group, and they go into schools and they teach kids how to ask questions. It's fascinating exercises they do. They go into all kinds of schools, a lot of low-income schools. They break kids up into groups of like 6, and they just have them take on a problem or a subject, and all they're allowed to do are ask questions. That's it. They're not supposed to give answers, give opinions, or anything. They're just supposed to ask questions. And it is amazing to see what happens because kids start to get much, much better at formulating questions, and they start to like think in questions, and then they start to take ownership of the questions. They start to really care about the answers to the questions, which they didn't care so much when it was the teacher's question, but now that it's their question, they care. So this is a big, it's a big thing. I'll probably be staying with this group and working on it a lot in the years to come. It's a big hurdle to get education to sort of take this seriously. But the reason it's so important, there's a lot of reasons it's so important, but one of the reasons it's so important is that we know that questioning is connected to innovation. We know that asking questions leads to innovation. And one of the things I did in the book was I collected story after story of an innovation, traced it back to the origins, and at the beginning you find someone asking questions, someone asking really interesting questions. Sometimes it's, so this is about the relationship between innovation and questioning, and sometimes the question comes from, guess what, a little girl, a 3-year-old girl in this case, who was the daughter of Edwin Land, the founder of Polaroid, and he was taking her picture back in 1943, and then he said to her, okay, now we're going to send the film out, and we'll see the results in about a week or whatever, and she wanted to know, why do we have to wait for the picture? Great question, right? And so Edwin Land started thinking about that. Why do we have to wait for the picture? Wait a minute, this is a really interesting why question. And then he started thinking about what-if questions. And one of his what-if questions was, well, what if you could take all the stuff that happens in a dark room and have it happen inside a camera? And that was basically the beginnings of the Polaroid instant camera. But it all came from that interesting why question. This led to the first instant camera. And perhaps even more importantly, it was the first selfie, which we have all of this to be thankful for now. So, so again, as I say, there are lots and lots of stories that, going back to the 1940s and then going up to the present. Netflix started when the founder of Reed Hastings said, he got hit with a huge late fee by Blockbuster. Why should I have to pay these late fees? There's got to be another way to do video rentals. And what if we had a system that had a membership and people weren't paying late fees? I don't know if any of you have the Nest thermostat. It's a pretty amazing device. Came about from the Tony Fadell, founder of Nest, looking at a everyday household thermostat and saying, this thing is old-fashioned. It doesn't make sense. We're in the age of smartphones. Why are we using these old thermostats? Similarly, Square. Square is a big deal now. Came about because Jack Dorsey of Twitter was talking to a friend of his, an artist. The artist had tried to make a sale of one of his pieces of artwork. The artist was this close to making the sale. The deal was about to happen. And then the buyers said, okay, here's our credit card. And the artist said, wait a minute, I'm an artist. I'm not a business. I'm not a company. I can't take a credit card. And he lost the sale. And when Jack Dorsey heard this story, his question immediately was, why is it that only companies can take credit cards? Why can't regular people take credit cards? This is the question that led to the cell phone. Why is it that when we want to call a person, we have to call a place? It doesn't make sense. We don't want the person's house. We want the person. So it's really interesting that, that all of these innovations, or so many of these innovations, start with a question. And it leads to people to say, okay, well, we know it's good, so how do we get better at questioning? What can we do to sort of get these questions? If these questions are worth millions or billions of dollars, the question that Tony Fadell asked got him a $3 billion deal with Google. So if these questions are so valuable, how do we get ourselves to ask more of them? It's not easy. That's what a lot of the book is about. There are different aspects that I studied with questioners, and why are they so good at asking these questions? What is it that's going on? And one of the things I found is that it has to do with the way they look at the world around them, the way they look at the everyday world around them. Innovators look at the world in a very interesting way. They pay attention to things that the rest of us are not paying attention to. This is also true of comedians, by the way. Comedians are very much like innovators. I studied George Carlin, and I believe that we need to release our inner George Carlin. I wrote that in the Harvard Business Review recently, of all places, that business people need to release their inner George Carlin, because George Carlin had an interesting way of looking at the world around him.
That's weird. Just had that little feeling. You ever get that funny that kind of feeling, that vuja day? Not deja vu, this is vuja day. This is the strange feeling that somehow none of this has ever happened before. and then it's gone, you know?
So George Carlin, the Vuja Day thing was not just like a little joke for him. He actually looked at the world with a Vuja Day perspective, and what, meaning that he would look at the everyday world that the rest of us ignored, and he would study it and look for the interesting contradictions and the things that didn't add up, the things that didn't make sense, and that was the source of his material. He would see these inconsistencies, and he would then begin to ask questions about them. So, he would see things the rest of us just kind of accept, and things that don't quite add up or make sense. I like this one. And this one is absolutely, I still don't know the answer to this. And this one is a great question, I think. So George Carlin was all about the questions. He was all about spotting the inconsistencies and questioning it. And but being the cynic that he was, even though he was totally into questioning, he also made fun of questions. So, I think that it's not an easy thing to explain, but the ability to step back and look at your everyday situation, your business, the way your company's doing things, even your life, to be able to step back and look at it with sort of a fresh eye is one of the first things that questioners do. And then the other thing they do is that they actually, once they notice something interesting, they actually ask about it. They challenge it, and they share the question with other people. And the way you question is also really important. One of the things I studied was how do you word questions well. And at Google and a number of other companies, IDEO, they are big on the idea of how might we. So it's an interesting thing to try in your own company. When you're exploring problems and you're trying to solve problems as a group, always start with how might we. How might we change this thing? How might we change this policy? How might we get better results on that? How might we do this differently? Just the way you word questions is really important because you need to put them in a very empowering way, and a way that doesn't attack people or challenge people, but sort of opens things up. And how might we is a great example of what a larger thing called appreciative inquiry. And I also talk in the book about how it's really important not just to raise questions, but to act on them. And a lot of people will say, gee, why do I have to pay these blockbuster rental fees, but they don't do anything about it. So what I found about innovators is that they have this process they go through where they are always moving forward with their questions. They go from why, challenging the reality, to what if we tried this. They're coming up with ideas now. They're using their imagination. And then they end up at how. And how is when you really kind of have to try to get things done, make your ideas real. So I think of really great questioners as being action-oriented. They act on their questions. Okay, this is the question that comes up. Really true, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And the answer to that, I'll refer to Dilbert. So, yes, there are stupid questions. And one of the things I talk about, and I'm talking to a lot of companies about this now who are interested in questioning, is that, they're really afraid that if you open up the culture, if you open the floodgates and you let everyone in the company ask questions, you're going to get a lot of stupid questions. You'll get people asking about ghosts. But the thing is, most people are pretty good questioners if you just give them some guidance. So what companies have to do, and again, I hate to always refer to Google, but Google's doing a good job. You sort of give people guidelines on the kind of questioning you're looking for in your company, the kind of questioning that's productive, the things you want to explore, the opportunities. And once you do that, once you give people guidance, you'll find that a lot of great questions come from throughout the company. But you also have to have respect for stupid questions, because sometimes stupid questions are really actually good questions in disguise. Like this question I came across from a number of years ago, asked by a football coach at the University of Florida Gators, right? So he's wondering why aren't the players urinating more. Now, I know that sounds like a weird question, right? Why is a coach even wondering something like that? But, he was noticing that the players were drinking a lot of water, and then at the end of the game, they didn't really have to go to the bathroom that much, and they were getting dehydrated, even though they were drinking all this water. So he said he's wondering about that. And then he asks a professor, a science professor at the university, so what's going on? The science professor explains to him, well, the water is not replacing the electrolytes and the bodily fluids, and so they're getting dehydrated. Okay, now it might have ended there, but see, the power of questions. You put a good question out there, people will start to engage with it and pick up on it. So the professor now takes that question. It goes from a why to a what if. He's wondering, okay, so what if you did have a liquid that was actually better at replenishing these fluids and did a better job than water, right? It was wetter than water. So he starts working on that in the lab, and he's, mixing things up in his beakers, and he ends up with a solution, a drink. He brings it to the coach. The coach says, I'm not going to drink that stuff. He says, let's try it on the players. So they give it to the practice squad, and the practice squad, voila, has an amazing day. They don't get dehydrated. They play really well. And the university decides, hey, we got to do something with this Gatorade stuff. And it was the beginning of a $20 billion sports drink industry. So just to make the point that even stupid questions, seemingly stupid questions, can sometimes be amazingly powerful. Lastly, I just want to say, can questioning change your life? I've been writing about this for Fast Company lately. I'm doing these posts that have been kind of viral, actually. People are really responding to them about whether you can use questions to overcome your fear or figure out your true passion in life. And it's interesting, and I've been collecting questions from like famous people or entrepreneurs. So some of the questions that people have been giving me is like, this is a really hot question in Silicon Valley. Everyone loves this question, and the idea is to ask yourself, try to if you could put your fear of failure aside, just for a minute, like what would you do? And that's actually a very releasing kind of question. This is a question I got from the author Daniel Pink, who believes that all of us should sort of think about, if we had to sum ourselves up in a question, in a sentence rather, what would the sentence be? And it's a great focusing exercise. All the happiness gurus say you should ask yourself, what did you enjoy doing when you were 10 years old? It's interesting. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that sometimes we were doing things we really loved when we were younger, and we moved away from them without really realizing it. This is the guy who founded PayPal says that he always tells everyone they should ask themselves this question: what do you believe that nobody agrees with you on? Because if you can identify that, you will have this unique belief or principle that only you really believe in, and that makes it that much more powerful. And then the guy who started Dropbox, Drew Houston, thinks we should ask ourselves this question: what's my tennis ball? What's your tennis ball? And he points out that when a dog is chasing a tennis ball, it is so absorbed that it does not notice anything else. It is totally engaged in the tennis ball. And so we all have to figure out what is our tennis ball. And if we have more than one tennis ball, that's okay. But if you have too many tennis balls, it can be kind of a problem. It gets kind of mean at the end. They actually dump tennis balls on the dog. Lastly, my version of the what's your tennis ball question, the one I would put out there for people to ask themselves is what's your beautiful question? And by that I mean the question that you can own, that's something that maybe would be a way for you to have a meaningful impact, or a way for you to change your business, a way for you to change your life, a way for you to help your community, or something that you can work on for a long time. You don't necessarily have to have the answer right away, because your beautiful question can be a thing you pursue for years. So in my case, my beautiful question right now has to do with the idea of, how might I spread the word about questioning? How might I do something impactful around questioning? And that's something I could follow for a long time, and I hope to. So that's pretty much it. Now, I don't know if do we have time for questions? A few questions? We do. Okay, great. It would be really inappropriate if I ended this session with that and said, no questions allowed. I won't take any questions. So if anybody does have a question, I will gladly answer it. See, now I just told you the importance of asking questions. And so if you don't ask a question, it's, oh, hey, we can, thank you. Just about questioning itself. My beautiful question is, and I like to phrase, I think everyone should use this, how might we or how might I? It's really effective. So my beautiful question is, how might I keep learning about questioning and keep sharing that learning with other people? And I'm especially interested in young students. How might I really get the word out to schools and to teachers and to parents about the importance of questioning? But also business, too. I think business, it's also really important in business. So.
Hey, Warren, having written this book, has it changed the way as a reporter you're asking questions?
I always took a lot of trouble with my questions. I always thought a lot about my questions because it's so important. But at the same time, my methodology as a reporter is not really to prepare all my questions in advance, because I don't like it when reporters read from a list of questions and go like this. Question number 5, what are you going to do? I think that, so what I want to do when I interview someone is create a conversation. And so the questions have to be not written down, but they have to be in my head somewhere. And then I pull them out when it's appropriate or when it fits in the conversation. I find that's the best way to interview people. So I think there was a question. Did you have a question back there? Oh, okay, it's just Brian. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, well, I am going to be signing books over there, right? Everybody gets a book, I think. Is that the way it works? So everybody gets a book, and I'm going to be signing books, and I also have custom bookmarks. So you're going to get a special bookmark. Thank you.